Speaking of mistakes, let's talk about politics. You became a U.S. Senator by chance when then Senator Ed Muskie became Secretary of State in 1980. 9 years later, you were elected Senate Majority Leader, and you immediately sat down with then Senate Minority Leader Bob Dole from Kansas. And you immediately struck an agreement with Senator Dole that to hear it spoken today would strike some as a fantasy, as absolutely impossible. Perhaps you could describe for us the agreement, not only that you reached with Senator Dole, that you honored for the next 6 years.
I called him on the same day that I was elected Majority Leader. And I asked to go to see him. He, of course, agreed, and I walked to his office. He then would become the Minority Leader. And we were to work together for at least the next 2 years. In fact, we worked for 6 years until I left the Senate. And I said to him very directly, I said, look, I said, you've been here 25 years. I've only been here a few years. You know more about the Senate in your little finger than I'll ever know. But I know enough to be aware that these jobs are very difficult if we trust each other. Impossible if we don't. So I said, I've come here to tell you how I intend to behave towards you and to ask you if you would behave in the same way toward me. I then set out the most basic, simple standards of decency, fair play, honest dealing. He was delighted. He was delighted. We shook hands, and to this very moment, all these years later, 25 years or whatever it is, never once has a harsh word ever passed between Bob Dole and me in public or in private. We became very close friends. We disagreed on almost every bill that came before the Senate. We tried to negotiate agreements. Sometimes we did, sometimes we couldn't. When we couldn't, we left it to the Senate. But we made it a point when we debated to debate on the issues, not in an insulting way. And I was the Majority Leader, so I obviously had a great deal more control than he did. And I was very conscious of never, ever trying in any way to embarrass him, and always leaving him a way out. And if it had to be a defeat with dignity. And it worked well, and as I said, Bob's now 92. He can't get around too well, but he's still sharp, and we talk regularly on the telephone, even to this day. We've been good friends. So it is possible to compete in our system without the kind of rancor, personal insult that you see that is now so commonplace. I believe that the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Citizens United case will go down in American history as one of the worst decisions ever made by any Supreme Court in our history. It didn't create the problem of money in politics. That's always been there. But it aggravated it tremendously. So now you have the circumstance in this country where billions of dollars are pouring into the political system. And those who defend the decision defended it on the grounds that sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you have full disclosure, then it doesn't matter who gives what, the public will know. But now, as a consequence of that and related decisions, we have much more money and much less disclosure. There are literally billions of dollars going into the campaigns, and you don't know who's giving what to whom. And the court's decision, I get asked this a lot, so I like to quote from it. I want to read you a couple of sentences. I want to ask you to comment on them. Independent expenditures, including those made by corporations, do not give rise to corruption or to the appearance of corruption. Furthermore, the appearance of influence or access will not cause the electorate to lose faith in our democracy. Is there anybody in this room who believes that? I've asked that question all over America, and not one person has raised their hand, and that's quote out of the court decision. And so that's the premise on which that decision was made, a description of an American political process that exists only in Alice in Wonderland. The other story is about my mother. When we were growing up, she often said to her children softly and with nostalgia, "You should see Lebanon. It's so beautiful, the air is pure, the water clear, the mountains, the forests, even the flowers smell better. Oh, Lebanon, my Lebanon." After arriving in the United States at the age of 18, she returned only once, very late in her life after my father died. My sister accompanied her, and they returned to the village where she grew up, a small village in the mountains, where they attended a reception and a dinner with relatives and friends in the house in which my mother had grown up. Late in the evening, my mother was asked to say something. Now, mind you, my mother had no education, never probably have ever spoken to a crowd before. But according to my sister, my mother stood, paused, looked out at the large, happy crowd, and with very great emotion and a broad smile said, "You should see America." It's so beautiful. The air is pure, the water clean. Even the flowers smell better. Oh, America, my America. She had little formal education. She couldn't read or write English, spoke it with a heavy accent. She worked her entire life on the night shift in a textile mill. But she was generous and loving, strong and wise, and she understood clearly the meaning of America. To me, no one has ever said it better. Oh, America, my America. Thank you all very much. Thank you.